Hello and welcome to our combat mission Fortress Italy AAR. Today we'll be checking out a armor-only engagement fought on a mountainous map. At our disposal will be 3 squadrons of Sherman 3s manned by the British, and opposing us will be 2 platoons of German Panzer IVs. My plan on this map is to flank the German tanks and use the terrain to our advantage, really. Against the superior German armor, we're going to have to rely on maneuver and flanking to deal with these tanks. The Germans have heavier guns and heavier armor, meaning that we will have to get around them and take pot shots before they can react in order to win this battle. I've deployed my tanks on our 3 flanks as such. We're going to have a left flank, which is going to use the defiles inside the mountainous regions, and we're going to have a center group doing some reconnaissance and some overwatching using these hills. And we also have another flank moving through some more defiles. First and foremost, I send my tanks forward to just grab ground, grab as much as possible, and I sent 2 tanks to the middle of the map into this valley here, where we can take a nice view of the battlefield. Reconnaissance is going to be key. Locating the enemy force with the smallest force possible will be optimal. Again, on the left flank, I advanced 2 more tanks, again doing some overwatch, some scouting of this region, and in the middle of all of this, I have my right flanks as tanks going through these defiles and moving through here, covered by my tanks on the ridge. I wasn't able to capture the initial contact moment, but what had happened was that we spotted the enemy vehicles moving down in the center of the valley. We lost 1 Sherman tank, but from the looks of it, we also took 1 Panzer IV out. Our Sherman 3, or remaining Sherman 3, was able to survive the first pot shot, and managed to survive a second blow and actually bounced off this tank, so that was pretty lucky. Now that we've located the enemy, we can now start maneuvering our tanks. I'm going to try to flank the center valley using the side lanes, but what I've done is that I've detached 1 tank from each of our flanks to essentially sit back and provide cover fire for the main, for our center column, really. Now, whichever tank reacts inside a battle typically wins inside the combat mission X2 engine. So I've detached 2 tanks which will essentially just sit in good places with good fields of fire, and I will be essentially using these 2 tanks to pick off enemy armor which advance onto our positions. You see here that they are quite effective because of the low turning speed of the tanks. We were able to actually pick off right around 3 Panzer IVs. Now in the meantime, I'm assembling the rest of the troops to make a incision to the rear of the enemy column. Here on the left flank, I'm moving my tanks through a small valley, and it looks like we've actually spotted 1 tank trying to intercept those tanks. So again, one of my tanks sitting and waiting, providing overwatch, managed to pick that off. On the right flank, I'm moving 2 tanks across the mountains to join up with our 3 tanks here in a bit of a pincer movement onto the enemy rear. Now, because reacting to enemy tank movements is very, very effective, coupled with the high accuracy and the high penetration of the Panzer IV gun, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to peek out my 3 Shermans at a optimal time in sync, and by doing that, at least 2 of them, or hopefully all of them, will be alive to take out the enemy tank. We got lucky, and the shot from the Panzer IV managed to penetrate our tank, although our tank was still operational. So here, my 3 tanks have peeked out. Doesn't look like there's any more Panzer IVs down there, so our tanks will try to overwhelm the Panzer IV with shots. And eventually the crew does bail out. Turns out it was actually the command tank. And another Panzer IV actually makes an appearance on top of the ridge, again taken out by our overwatch tanks. Meanwhile, on our right flank, our tanks are advancing. They seem to have engaged the force crossing the ridge. Actually, was a platoon of Panzer IVs. It wasn't just two vehicles. These two tanks were, well, one was taken out. Another one continued forward and was actually hit by an enemy shell. Now, luckily, this only immobilized our tank. Inside these situations, generally speaking, whenever you get hit, your tank does suffer a bit of a concussion-like stun, which may render the crew incapable for a few seconds to minutes. However, in this situation, our Sherman 3 was actually quite reactive. After being immobilized, it was able to get off 2 shots, penetrating both of the Panzer IVs on the ridge, however not knocking them out. In the end, we managed to finish off this tank at a costly price. The 2 tanks traded shells and both of them were knocked out. Now, each force inside this battle had right around 10 tanks. I believe we had 11 while the Germans had 9. I figured that most of the enemy tanks were already dead. I didn't bother to count them, so I moved 2 of the original Overwatch tanks coming from our Overwatch on the right flank, and I just kind of moved them up on top of this hill here to eliminate any other Panzer IVs that may happen to be on the road. However, all they found were Axis crewmen, so it turns out that we actually managed to take out all enemy tanks. Suffered 3 vehicle losses this battle, while the Germans suffered 10. That would be, I would say that's quite a significant victory, both on the operational scale as well as the strategical scale, simply due to the fact that the Germans weren't able to produce that many tanks per month. Hope you guys enjoyed this AAR. Be sure to like and subscribe.